guys, it's Faye from Solar Flow, and I am back with an all-new video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil psychic energy read into Queen Elizabeth I. We are not just going to be exploring who she was and what her contributions were. More specifically, we're going to be peeling back the 3D veil and explore what was the real reason she chose not to marry, what she really thought about her father, Henry VIII, what she thinks about the current British royal family, and she even shared some of what her experience has been like on the other side. This and so much more. So if that sounds good to you, please stick around. Now, before we get into the energy read on her and the goods that Elizabeth herself had brought to me, we're first going to start by exploring some three-dimensional information into who she was. Now, as a reminder, this is certainly not the entirety of somebody's Wikipedia page, but I very deliberately choose what I share about a person. So it's typically the first paragraph. In Elizabeth's case, it's a little bit more than just the first paragraph, but typically it's the first paragraph, what some of the contributions were, perhaps what some criticism had been, and that's about it. But in this case, even more so, I'm very conscious and deliberate about what I'm choosing to share with you, because I want to specifically highlight certain things that are going to seamlessly blend with the energy reading into who Elizabeth was. Because there were certainly certain events, external events that happened in her lifetime that would shape and mold the person that she had become. That's what's really notable, and those are the things that I'm specifically sharing about her from her Wikipedia page. Because there's always going to be an Agent Smith that's going to say, but, you left out. So no, I'm going to say, but, I deliberately chose to share certain things above all others. It's not that I leave things out that I just don't, I think make a person look bad and I don't want to make them look bad. It's just to say, if you yourself have internet and that's how you can watch my videos, if you yourself want to learn everything there is to know about a person, you can also access their Wikipedia page. Is that rude? I don't know. You can let me know. The snark, it's going to come out on occasion, especially because I know not many of you actually enjoy and appreciate my historical figures content. For shame. This is gold right here, y'all. All right, here we go. Some 3D information that I deliberately am choosing to share with you. Not because I'm leaving anything out, but because this seamlessly blends into the energy reading on her. So here we go. Elizabeth, who was born on September 7th, 1533, and who crossed out of her body on March 24th, 1603, was Queen of England and Ireland from 1558 until her death in 1603. She was the last and longest reigning monarch of the House of Tudor. Her reign and its effect on history and culture gave name to the Elizabethan era. More on that ahead. Elizabeth was the only surviving child of Henry VIII and his second wife, Anne Boleyn. When Elizabeth was 2 years old, her parents' marriage was annulled and her mother was executed. Elizabeth was declared illegitimate. However, Henry restored her to the line of succession when she was 10 years old. Elizabeth was imprisoned for nearly a year during her sister's reign on suspicion of supporting Protestant rebels. Once she was monarch, in government, she was more moderate than her father and siblings, and one of her mottos was, quote, I see and keep quiet, end quote. In religion, she was relatively tolerant and avoided systematic persecution. One of the first things that she had done as monarch was to establish the Protestant Church, which went on to become the Church of England. The Elizabethan era is famous for the flourishing of English drama, which included Shakespeare, the prowess of English maritime adventurers, and the defeat of the Spanish Armada. So England experienced a renaissance under Queen Elizabeth. Elizabeth never married, nor had any heirs, and some historians depict her as short-tempered and a sometimes indecisive ruler who enjoyed more than her fair share of luck. However, after the short and disastrous reigns of her half-siblings, her 44 years on the throne provided a welcome stability and helped forge a sense of national identity. She was also celebrated as the Virgin Queen because, again, she chose never to marry, but let's see if in fact that was the case. So here we go. Energy read into Queen Elizabeth. As soon as I had connected to her energy, Elizabeth had shared with me that she had an enormous amount of anxiety. Though, of course, it was not called that back then, nor known that that's in fact what it was. So it was thought that she had a nervous disposition and on occasion had trouble eating or sleeping, which now, in today's day and age, we actually know that trouble eating and sleeping are benchmarks of anxiety. But it wasn't known that that was what it was back then. Elizabeth had shared with me that she was deeply traumatized, and she carried an enormous amount of ancestral trauma. So that's why I chose to highlight to you guys that she had been imprisoned for nearly a year, because that is going to contribute to the natural anxiety that she had already experienced. But we're going to take it a step further and we're going to say it's more like it's going to compound, because the formation of the anxiety inside of her did not begin when she was imprisoned. It was only compounding something that was already there. Because she had shared with me, imagine growing up knowing that your father had unalived your mother so that he could marry another. So, and more than that, her mother was a fixture in her life up until the age of 2 years old when Anne Boleyn had been beheaded. So her mother was no longer a part of her life. She also had shared with me that she did not have much of a relationship with her father. And in fact, the only safe people for her to confide in and to have any level of a loving relationship with were the governesses that had raised her. So she actually had an enormous amount of formation of trauma and anxiety in her formative years that were compounded by her being imprisoned. But she also had the ancestral trauma from her father, Henry VIII, because again, how many times was he married? Like, was it 5? How many wives had he unalived? So she was not immune to the facts of the family that she had been born to. So yeah, she had some issues, and anxiety and trauma were some of them. She had shared with me that she had been terrified of falling in love because she was convinced if she did, she herself would be unalived. How heartbreaking is that? Thinking if you ever fall in love, it would lead to your eventual demise. In part, this is going to explain why she never married, Though she did point out that, of course, monarchs do not marry, at least back then anyway, or one should rather say then, did not marry for love, but for advantageous alliances between countries. However, she thought that proximity and also the expectation that she was going to be producing an heir that would carry on the lineage of who was going to remain on the throne. So, she was going to be spending time with her husband. There was going to be sexy time expectations. So the proximity of them spending time with one another could lead to love. And again, she was terrified that if she fell in love, she would be unalived. So she had chosen instead to have lovers. So again, remember that I had shared with you one of her mottos was, quote, "I see and I keep quiet." One could say perhaps that was her motto because it was also the expectation that other people around her, what they see, they would have kept quiet as well. Because she is sharing, she had lovers. However, the lovers that she would choose, she would make sure that they would not always be around. So therefore, she would choose people where there would be some element of forced distance that would temper any potential love that could be developed and experienced. So specifically, she would choose people that she would be sending out perhaps to do like diplomatic missions to other countries, or sending people out to do like reconnaissance work or something like that. But essentially, it was never going to be with people that would have a long-standing position at court. Because again, that was forced proximity, which could lead to love. I'm not going to stop driving the point home that she was terrified of falling in love because she was convinced that if she did, she would be unalived because of it. So even with her lovers that she had chosen, it was people that were not going to be not always going to be in her orbit, as in we're not always going to be around her, because that would be forced proximity, which could lead to the development of love. And she was not going to allow herself to fall in love. However, she also had shared with me she did not marry because she knew exactly who she was and what she brought with her. She was a monarch. She had a throne, she had a crown, and she had countries. So she reasoned, what would stop her husband of alliances and conveniences to take what was hers and unalive her? This is trauma. She is speaking from a deeply traumatic and wounded point of view because the impact of knowing that her father had unalived her mother in the pursuit of love or lust of another had remained with her. So much so to the point that she associated love with being unalived. That's trauma. That is deeply rooted trauma. So a lot of the reading and the energy of Queen Elizabeth was one that featured an enormous amount of trauma and anxiety that was bred from that trauma. Elizabeth had also shared that women were a commodity. A royal woman, doubly so. However, a caught woman quickly lost all value. First, by being caught, as in getting married. Then, with the ever-expanding waistline, with every subsequent heir that they would birth. So she reasoned, better not to be caught in the first place, and to be useful as a monarch in other ways. And that is why England had had a renaissance under her watch, because she felt that she would have more to offer this way, that she would have more that she could give back to her people and her country. And after what her tyrant of a father had done and had taken, first from his country and second from his wives, it was the least she felt she could do to settle the country in the wake of her truly disastrous family. Now, she again reminded me of her anxiety. And I did point out that an enormous amount of the energy reading on her would feature said anxiety and the trauma that was associated with it. So again, she drove the point home in reminding me about her anxiety and how now she understands it had created stomach issues inside of her, that because again, it wasn't known that that's what it was and what it was, what body part it was associated with. It went mostly unresolved and untreated. Now, she's referencing her stomach because if anyone is watching this has ever experienced anxiety, or I think maybe a better way of saying it is if you've never experienced anxiety, which frankly, living in this day and age, I don't know how that could be the case, but that's not here nor there. But for anyone who has not experienced anxiety, you would not necessarily know then that it is primarily experienced in the abdomen. And the sensation of it could be one that's described almost like butterfly wings tapping on the inside of your abdomen, or feeling like there's a swarm of bees flying around in the abdomen, or feeling like there's, like clenching or cramping in the abdomen. So anxiety is primarily experienced in the abdomen. Could also be experienced in the heart with like heart palpitations, but in Elizabeth's case specifically, it was associated to the feeling that she had in her stomach. Now, anything that is of a three-dimensional level has some sort of a soul, spiritual, energetic, or vibrational element that comprises the formation of it in the three-dimensional world. So for Elizabeth, it was the soul and the vibrational element that comprised the formation of the anxiety in her stomach. And because it was not understood and it was left unresolved, that then therefore led to her having truly bad skin. Now, I don't know what history says is the actual cause of her having bad skin, but on an energetic level, it was actually due to the unresolved anxiety that she experienced in her abdominal region. And she had shared with me, she had truly terrible skin. But she now comes to understand that that was the issues that she experienced in terms of the anxiety and the trauma, sought to be resolved by letting their presence be known, which was in her case through her skin. And she had shared with me that the anxiety that she experienced abated, but it never truly went away. It's only just that she had gotten better and more used to suppressing the anxiety that she had experienced. Now, she was also depicted by some people as being short-tempered and sometimes indecisive. That is also the formation through her behavior that was reflecting instances in which she herself was feeling triggered by her trauma that led to her either acting indecisive or in her appearing as if she was short-tempered. But it was actually in those moments she was triggered by something. Because again, she carried an enormous amount of trauma and anxiety inside of her and with her. It never abated. It never truly went away. It's only just that she had gotten better and more used to suppressing it. And that the only time she ever truly felt free of it, I'm hemming at the truth, the only time she ever truly felt free of it were fleeting and in the moments right after post-coitus bliss, as in the moments after she experienced an orgasm. Her heart would still be racing. She would feel as if she was floating. She felt free and imagined that that must have been what love felt like. But she would absolutely never allow herself to experience said love. Love was not an option. It was never an option. Because people died for it. People killed for it. And people lied for it. Her father being one of the foremost examples of that in her lifetime. But not for her. She would not love, and therefore she would live. And she had shared with me that after by those days' standards anyway, a long and successful life, despite the lack of love, once she had crossed out of her body, she took one look around at the afterlife and she had said, quote, "Right, I think I'll just be passing on through," end quote. But imagine that in a British accent. It would sound way better. So again, she took one look around at the afterlife and said in a great British accent, quote, "Right, I think I'll just pass right on through," end quote. And that is what she had done. Because she was a pragmatist, after all, who set out to be useful in other ways that she could be other than just producing an heir. And how exactly could she be useful without a body? She couldn't. So there was no reason, from her point of view, to stick around near the earth plane after she had crossed out of her body. Now, this is also going to explain why her energy was so incredibly hard for me to make contact with. She had been on my list for probably about 9 months. And although I occasionally clean off the list and take off names of people I can't access their energy, her name was one I was committed to making contact with. So I kept her on there for a hella long time, but her energy was incredibly hard to track down and to make contact with. And that is in fact due to the fact that she rarely spends time around the earth plane, if at all. Except, she shared with me, when her curiosity calls to her. Because she was not above court gossip, and she in fact secretly reveled in it. Especially knowing who was coupling with who, and that the court gossip was a close second to her, relieving her anxiety. So, she does not come around all that much to check in, except maybe on an occasion to check on the current royal family. To which point, when she had shared this with me, she shook her head and clucked her tongue like this, like saying, "Oh, it's a shame." So she shook her head and clucked her tongue at King Charles and how soft he was growing up and how soft he is. In fact, how soft all the current royals now are. Except Princess Anne, who from her perspective is more masculine than her pansy brothers. And while Elizabeth shared her father had many faults, but virility and masculinity were not one of them. But alas, this royal family is not her royal family. And no, she is not even stating it's due to genetics, because again, she never married, she never produced further generations. So she's not stating because it's not genetically linked to her, and that's why she thinks that they're all so soft. What you have to read between the lines of what she's saying, because I did. What she's actually saying is because this royal family is not actually the royal family that has any claim to be the royal family. As in, there was a delineation in the line of succession and some other royal family took over, and that's the royal family that is now on the throne in this day and age. So yeah, they're soft, but from her point of view, it's not because they don't share the genetics to her family, which had certainly virility and masculinity, but it's more in fact due to the fact that they're not even the British royal family that's in the line of succession. So perhaps that's in fact why they are so different. But nonetheless, the hour grows late, she said to me, which I thought to be very humorous because there is no time on the other side. So it's not like it was literally late and she needed to go to sleep, because first of all, souls don't need sleep, but also there's no time on the other side. So I took her saying that the hour grows late to mean that she was just about ready to close off our energetic exchange with one another. And she said she must go back to her home where she can blessedly just be. And I was like, Elizabeth, tell me, where is said home? To which time she had shared with me, it's on another planet. Because Elizabeth is a starseed. Was a renaissance not experienced in England under her watch? And have I not shared with you guys that one of the hallmarks of the activation of more than one starseed at any particular time in history is the experience of a renaissance? Because not all starseeds enact change with their own actions by being either a writer or an artist, but by creating an environment where said artists and writers can thrive. Because that's the environment that Elizabeth created as monarch. And as I remind you, starseeds do not have easy lives because the challenges they experience act as the activation point in their waking up to their meaning and purpose in any particular lifetime, which is to enact some sort of change on society. And that was certainly the case for Elizabeth, despite the castle that she had lived in. So this concludes the energy reading into Queen Elizabeth I. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this and found it to be perhaps insightful or thought-provoking. This is your reminder to take what resonates and to leave the rest behind. And as always, and until next time, to stay in the high vibration.